Welcome everyone to my attempt at a guide to Lost in Prayer. I wanted to talk about two things. The first one being the different tactics you can use to play efficiently, and then I wanted to talk a bit about how to progress your character. I believe it would be a good idea to start this guide with an example of what not to do in this game. Alright, so this is a fresh run. We are on the very first floor in Hell, and in the very first room there is already two enemies. We are going to move ahead and we are going to start attacking them. As you can see, we could easily kill these two enemies. However, we did take some damage. Now yes, this damage can be healed with potions that are sometimes dropped by enemies and sometimes found in levels, but this is not something you can count on, this is not reliable. So this damage is going to stay with us for the entire run. You have to think on the long term when you play this game. On top of that, you aren't always going to be able to avoid damage, so it's important that you keep your HP high for when you will need to take hits. Throwing enemies into holes is by far the easiest way to dispose of them. It's going to kill instantly anything that doesn't have wings. You can push the enemies, you can also pull them. And there is one more thing you can do, which right now only works against the monkeys, I think. They have a buff that makes them fly. You can wait for them to use it, you can lead them above a hole, and you can stall them until the buff expires and they fall to their death. To drown an enemy, you need to keep them in water, lava, or goo for 3 consecutive turns. The problem being that any enemy that can drown will move to another tile to avoid this. This means that in the demo, only the Seraphim can reliably use drowning. That's because he has Halt, which holds the target in place for 3 turns at level 1, preventing any escape. Kiting requires a bit more knowledge about the game. There are 2 ways you can kite in Lost in Prayer. The first one is by using some abilities. The best examples for this are the Trog and the Crawler. These 2 characters have abilities that lets them essentially run away while damaging enemies, which means that the enemies can never really hit you back. The second one is having more speed than your enemies, which at some point will let you act twice. Now, if you act twice and the enemy can only act once, you are in a position where you can both deal damage and reposition somewhere the enemy can't hit you. Now, the one thing that makes kiting so effective is that it works against flying enemies, which are otherwise immune to everything else. If you want to safely dispose of a Seraphim, kiting is really your only option unless you're using a character like the Turtle that can just afford to face tank everything, but that's character specific. Before we talk about what you should be getting in terms of abilities, I first need to explain what the challenges that the different stages present are. Stage 1 is really only there so you get your first abilities and a couple of items, it's trivial. But from stage 2, harder enemies will begin to appear, and some can absolutely 1v1 your character. These 2 enemies are most notably the nightmares in Hell and the monkeys in Heaven. Now these 2 enemies will deal a ton of damage, they have 200 plus HP, and they are fast. The last thing you want to do, even if you can win your 1v1s, is to face these enemies directly, because they will deal significant amount of damage, and that damage you will never be able to recuperate. What does this tell us? Well, you're going to want to prioritize anything that lets you deal with these two enemies without taking damage. So that's using the tactics I discussed before. If we take the Jester right here, my first two levels are going to be pushy or handsy, and ideally both. Now, this is a push, this is a pull, I can move enemies into holes, I don't have to take any damage. That's great. For the first couple of levels, that's really all I need. Now that you have tools to push enemies around, kite them, whatever, you can comfortably finish stage 2. And then, provided you are in heaven, you enter stage 3, the Seraphim shows up, and he kills you. Because he's fast, he's tanky, he deals good amounts of damage, and you cannot cheese him, unless you're really fast and can afford to kite him. That's not going to be possible for every character, I suspect. Where does this leave us? Well, starting from the end of stage 2, I'm going to say maybe the middle of stage 2, you're going to want to invest into combat abilities, whether that's unlocking new ones or upgrading the current ones. That's because we are back to what I was saying at the beginning of the video, you're not going to always be able to avoid taking damage. Maybe you're going to find an enemy that really just hard counters you, and you're going to have to face tank them to just 1v1 them and hope it works out. So if you focus on crowd control, for example, you're going to find that you don't have the damage output to survive stage 3. So once you've got the tools to comfortably cheese, quote-unquote, the target that you can cheese, invest into making your character stronger. Now, a couple of characters also have stats increase. That's probably not a great example because it's a bit special, but let's see if I can find one quickly. I think Seraphim actually has one. Yeah, so increase the attack permanently. Absolutely not worth it. At least in the demo, there aren't enough stages, and you don't have enough levels on your character to justify taking stats increase over new or better abilities. Alright, you've been listening to me ramble for 7 minutes or something. Let's talk about the final thing that I want to talk about, which is to say sins and virtues. Every single one of them increases some stats and lowers others. Now, obviously some are better on some characters. Who cares? I'm not going to go over every single one of them because they're going to be changed and that doesn't matter for now. What I really want to talk about is what's going to be good for most characters, and that's speed. Speed is going to be the most important stat in this game, I suspect, even in the final version. If you have enough, you are going to be able to act twice when the enemies can only act once. And that's going to be a massive power boost. You can do what I was talking about when talking about kiting, which is to say, attack an enemy, run away. Attack an enemy, wait for them to get closer, attack the enemy, run away, repeat. Beyond this, I don't know if that's going to change with the release, but I feel like dodging is always going to be better than defense. Defense right now, it's not that it's useless, it's that it's really worth it as a trade-off. Like, look at Pride, you're gaining dodge. Dodge is a lot better than defense. Why should you reduce damage when you can negate most of it? Well, If you're playing something like a turtle, obviously that's another story, but for most characters, speed and dodge are really going to be worth it. You're also probably going to want some levels in accuracy. Right now, I feel like a good sweet spot is within the 140. That lets you reliably hit enemies that have high dodge. I suppose this is when the YouTubers thank you for listening to them for 10 minutes while they ramble in their microphones. I hope my video wasn't too horrible. If you haven't played Lost in Prayer, I encourage you to go on the Steam page and download the demo, it's free, and take some time to give your feedback to the developers. The game isn't receiving a ton of attention, so yeah, have a good day and all of that.